My name is Sherry Sutton. I am your marketing mentor, and we are here today with one of my favorite people, Jess Sato. Say hi.
Hey everyone.
Hey. So, Jess is my TEDx coach. So, if you guys have been living under a rock and don't know, I did a TEDx back in January. It was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream, and Jess was my coach through the entire process. So, I wanted to have her come on and just kind of talk to everybody and about like how that process works, because I know a lot of my clients are interested in getting a TEDx, doing a TEDx. So what does that look like? And I figured instead of me just putting together something, I'd bring in the expert and we'll hear from you. So Jess, you want to do a little introduction about yourself and what you do? And then, we'll just talk about how to get a TED.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be talking with you about this. I am a business growth and visibility strategist, and I really work with people to help them figure out what is their big idea and then use that in whatever capacity makes the most sense for them. For some people, that's TEDx, for others, it's other platforms. And different visibility options. But at the core, it starts with really understanding what your big idea is and really being able to articulate that in a really clear and succinct way. And so that's really where my heart is. And TEDx is one of the platforms that I have supported in the past, and love the concept behind it of big ideas to the stage and ideas changing everything. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I love the whole TEDx mission. So I want to we're using a term that I want to make sure we first start out with, which is what's the difference between a TED talk and a TEDx talk? I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it.
Yeah. Okay. So first, let me just make one disclaimer. I'm not affiliated with TED or TEDx, but I have had the privilege of supporting a whole variety of speakers through a series of different TEDx events like TEDx Breckenridge, TEDx Franklin, and a series of others. And then in private capacities like with Sherry. So the primary difference is that TED is sort of the parent organization, and they host the annual TED conference that happens every year in April in Vancouver. And they host a whole series of other big, I just think of them as really big conference style events that take usually a week or so. And then TEDx events are events that are happening more at the local level. So, you probably looked around at neighboring cities and you'll see TEDx Dallas, TEDx Frisco, TEDx fill in the blank. And those tend to be more focused on local or regional issues. And it really came about because a lot of people, as the TED conference became more and more popular, wanted to be on the TED stage, and there just simply wasn't enough space. But in the larger vein of getting big ideas out into the world, um, Big TED, as I like to call them, created a whole platform for other people that was almost more like a franchise model is how I sort of think about it. Every event at the TEDx level is independently organized, but follows the same standards and rules and regulations that Big TED follows at their own conference. And so it just opened the door for more opportunities, more accessibility. And I think the last I checked, it's something on the order of like 3,000 plus TEDx events happen every year. So you can see that big difference between TED, one event happening every year that might have 30 or 40 speakers versus TEDx, which has 3,000 times, 5 to 10 speakers at every event. So just created much, much more opportunity for people to be able to, get their ideas out on the stage in the TED format.
And I believe those regional TEDx events, even though they're managed locally, they still go through an approval process and a vetting process.
Yep.
And I don't know if they like, franchise, though it's not a franchise, but that kind of like they're vetted through TEDx, and they've got certain rule or through TED, Big TED. And
Yeah.
so they've got certain rules they need to follow just to make sure that there's still consistency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, every event organizer has to apply for and be approved for a license. And I'm not exactly sure on the details on the licensing side. That's never been an area that I've been in, but all the details, if that's a route that someone's actually interested in, you can certainly search to see, is there a license available in your area? And I think you can get all of that information on TED.com.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think so probably the next question is, so if I want to do a TEDx, how do I get one? And I'll just share a little bit about my experience and how I got mine. I had set the intention that that's what I want to do. It was on my vision board, which is right over there. You can literally see the TEDx logo. And I just started looking, who do I know has done a TEDx? Who do I know, where, and just Googling, like, where in my area is there one in Dallas? I'd heard about, there was one at SMU at one point.
Mhm.
So I looked up my contact there. And then I found that there was one in Frisco planned. And so I just went to the website, and there was a place where they said, we're looking for speakers, and there was an application process online. Each of the different I have found that the different TEDx's have the different organizers have different ways that they, ask for applications. But for me, it was a form, you say what you're going to talk about, what your big idea is, you do a little like 5-minute video, and you send that off. Is that consistent kind of throughout?
Yeah, I would say that's sort of typical. I mean, most TEDx events have a speaker application process. That process varies by event, like I said, because they're all independently organized, the kinds of questions that they're asking, what information they want, whether they want a video, whether it's an audition, all those bits and pieces vary. But at the core, I would say the vast majority of TEDx events have a speaker selection process that's rooted in an application. Um, and I'll come back to that piece in a second. And then there are some that are curated, meaning, the speaker organizer or the speaker selection committee has a particular focus that they're trying to do, and they are actively seeking speakers from or that can speak to the issues that they want to discuss, or want discussed on that TEDx stage. And so they might do, more of a invite only kind of approach. And then sometimes it's a hybrid. So there's a whole
Mhm.
bunch of ways that you can go about doing it. Um, and then, as far as the application, there's kind of a couple of core pieces that I'll say by and large, most of the time you'll see things like some kind of statement about what is your big idea, and the amount of space you get varies. And that's the thing that makes this process a little bit challenging. It's like you get a core idea, you get it really drafted up nice and tight, and then you go to another application and it's like, okay, cut that in half, you get 50 words to describe it. Or
Mhm.
sometimes it's like you get one sentence, or sometimes it's longer. So, being very, very clear about like what your big idea is a critical part of this process. And based on my own experience, there is no doubt that most people they might have a general idea of what their idea is, but it's not always that clear. And I mean, you even know from your own process, you go into it thinking, okay, this is my idea, and it's clear in your own mind. But when it comes to actually drafting out the talk, it requires a whole different process, which I'm sure we'll get into. Um, and then some other questions like, why are you the right person to give this talk? Is looking for things like, some of it's your professional credentials. I want to make sure that the person who's on the stage talking about the issues, particularly if they're, specialty types issues, is actually qualified to talk about that. So if you're talking about medicine or, wellness or things like that, they're going to want someone who can speak to that with integrity and credibility. And then a couple of other questions I think are relevant. A lot of places will ask, what's your connection to fill in the blank location? Because again, they're looking for connection to their local area or their region, because we understand the issues that are affecting the community. And then what are the sort of like implications, or um, sort of the local and global implications of this issue? Like, why is this important right now? And what happens if we don't talk about this right now? Those are some of the core questions you'll see in some variety, on most applications. And then the other point that you mentioned about auditions or videos, some will ask for that. Others will wait until the second round, if there is a second round of the application process, for you to either submit a video where you go a little bit more in depth on your talk, Or it could be a live audition. Some places do actually have live auditions. I know TEDx Breckenridge in the past has done that. I think TEDx Folsom in California did something like that. So there's a whole gamut of things that you can expect to see on applications. But at the core, it comes down to what's your big idea and why are you the right person to deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah. I also found for me, there's so many people. I think there were 300 applicants
Mm,
for the TEDx that I ended up doing, TEDx Frisco. And I mean, there's just so many people. There's
yes.
a lot of noise in that. And so
Mhm.
I also recommend find out who the organizer is and
Yeah.
reach out to them. So my process was a little bit different in the sense they
Yeah.
had planned a TEDx Frisco in May of 2023. I might have
Mhm.
the date a little wrong,
Is that
but
right?
roughly.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the organizer could no longer fulfill on it, but they had already chosen all their speakers. So I found out about it. It was a little bit before. Oh, maybe it was October. Anyway,
Mm,
and I found out about it a little bit before, and I was like, well, it's only a month till the event. So I'm going to throw it out there. We'll see. And so I submitted something and I never heard anything back, right? I found out who the organizer was. I DM'd them, I followed them on Facebook. I sent notes in all the places and I never heard anything back. And I was like, okay, it wasn't meant to be. Well, then I never saw anything about it. And so I went back and I looked on the Facebook page and the date had come and gone. And I was like, well, something clearly happened. So fast forward to whatever it was, October, and someone came out saying, hey, we are doing this event and
mhm,
new organizers and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, here's my chance. What I didn't know actually was, again, that they had already chosen all of the organizer. They had already chosen all the speakers. They were just going to take the speakers from May and use them again. But I found out who the organizer was. I DM'd her. I sent her my notes. I sent her my application. I like, can I resubmit my application? And what does this look like? And I really want to be involved. And I, found her in all the places and just sort of stalked her a little bit and was like, I want to talk to you. And so unbeknownst to me, she had actually already seen me somehow through social media and identified me, was like, wow, she'd be great for the TEDx stage at some point. Then I sent her that note. So we ended up connecting and, I got interviewed essentially. And I
mhm.
didn't know it till, again, also nothing I didn't know until later. She actually never saw my application. She had just seen me on
Oh,
social media and was like, she'd be great on TED, on the TEDx stage. And I was like, oh, I applied. And she was like, oh, you did? I have to go find it. So it ended up, for me being, I mean, it was a little bit of kismet, but it was also a little bit of just putting myself out there. And I think that's one of
yeah.
the things that sometimes when there's these online applications, we can just like send it in and be like, okay, well, I'll just wait, right?
Mhm, mhm,
But
mhm,
took those extra steps of like finding out who the organizer was, going to her social, liking everything she did, commenting on everything she did, sending her a note,
mhm.
asking, just asking for the sale,
Yeah.
we talk about in sales, and it worked, right? I don't, if I had just gone with my online application, I
Mhm.
don't think I ever would have met with her and I would have never gotten it. And so that's one thing I would encourage you is to just, don't stalk them. I
Right.
use that word
Yeah.
lightly, right? I'm kind of joking around, but just also like find them on LinkedIn, send them a note, make sure they know that you're interested. You should do this in all areas of your sales and marketing anyway. But for me, I know that it was a big important part of the process. So all right, so you get the TEDx. And well, one thing just on the application, I have heard from people that often they will apply to multiple places
Mhm.
just to see which one they might get into. Do you recommend people do that, or what's
Yeah,
your
there's
thought on that?
there's sort of like, I don't know, there's like different schools of thought here. There's some that's sort of like throw all the spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks. And, probably the likelihood of that is pretty decent. I mean, if you put enough applications in and you have a clear enough big idea, probably it will land somewhere. That's one approach. Then there's the, hope and pray for the the single option you want. And I think that's really risky given the number of people who are really trying to apply. I mean, like you said, I mean, I've been looking at, tons of emails coming back from event organizers, and they're getting 500, 600, 700, sometimes over 1,000 applications for 8 to 10 slots. I mean, so you can kind of do the math and see like the odds aren't always that great, especially for some of those bigger, more popular events. So I like to take sort of like a hybrid approach to this and really be strategic about where you apply, but also recognize that it is a little bit of a numbers game, at least in my experience. And so what I do with my own clients is we will look at, all the places that actually make sense to apply. These are usually places where they have some kind of actual personal connection, either because they live there, they used to live there, they went to school there, things along those nature, or even, this is an issue that is directly impacting this particular community. Um, so kind of taking that more strategic, thoughtful approach and then actively submitting applications in those areas. And to your point, I sort of think of it as like a little bit like a stool, like a three-pronged approach to to you know getting those event organizers to notice you. Like you said, you don't want to stalk them outright. So, you submit the application and follow the process. But then there's sort of two other pieces that I think are relevant. One is, look at who else that has spoken potentially at that very same event or at other events that maybe you're interested in, and just ask them some questions about, what was your experience like? Um, you know, and that takes like so many forms, right? What was your experience like? And I'm thinking about applying to this event. What do you think I should know? And in some cases, if it's appropriate, you could ask for an invitation or an introduction to that event organizer. And then there's, like you said, sort of that cold outreach approach where you can reach out to event organizers or someone who is part of that event. And I think embracing it from a place of curiosity and really just saying, hey, I'm really interested in the event that you're hosting. What is the process that you are using to select speakers? And, is there anything I should know? And kind of take it from there. So, you kind of got a lot of flexibility in terms of like how you approach this. And but you have to go in knowing that you're going to be rejected. Like, I don't know a single person who has been accepted on the first go. I mean, that's so, so rare. I mean, you're like a unicorn. Um, uh, and like you said, there is a little bit of kismet. There is a little bit of like, strategy there. But I would say that experience is relatively unique
Yeah.
because most people get multiple, if not lots of rejections before they ever get selected. And so you have to develop a little bit of thick skin. You have to know that it's a bit of a long game, that just because you submit your application doesn't mean that you're going to get accepted. Because the other thing that we don't really talk about a lot, but I think is super relevant, is that we don't really know what the event organizers and speaker selection committees are actually looking for, right? They give us a theme in some cases, more often than not. And, let's say your talk aligns directly with that, but you don't know how many other talks sort of along the same vein as yours have been submitted. You don't know what other talks have been submitted or how they fit into sort of that larger narrative, right? Because these are an event, right? So there's a whole story arc that they're presenting. So that's why I say, we have to have some degree of thick skin here, because you just don't know. And a lot of times it actually has nothing to do with you or your big idea. It just happens to do with what they're looking for, what sparks their interest on any given day. And so I think just go in knowing that it's a long game and that you're going to apply more often, more than once for sure. And you'll probably be setting yourself up for more success in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good advice. Okay. So you get the TEDx.
Mhm.
What I did was realize very quickly that I was over my head. And while I mean, I think it's one of the things that I see as my superpower is I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to ask for help. And I can say that there were people who I was shared the stage with who didn't do that and really, really struggled, some until the night before. And I watched that and was like, I would never want to be in that position where you're like on one of the biggest stages in the world and it's the night before and you're still not sure what you're going to say. Like that makes me break out in hives, right? As much as
Mhm,
I'm someone who
mhm,
like,
mhm.
likes to wait till the last minute sometimes.
Yeah.
I knew that this was not the place to do that. And I'm telling anybody who's listening to this is not the place to do that. I was so prepared and so
Mhm,
ready that when I took the stage, I had what an out of body experience and really don't even know what I said during those moments. Like I remember there was one point I was like, holy crap, I'm on the TED stage. Oh my God, am I talking? Is my mouth moving? Am I saying what I'm supposed to be saying? Because it's such a big moment that like you need to rehearse, like the fact that I had rehearsed it over and over and over again, it
mhm,
became part of my DNA. I'm so grateful that I did that again because I saw other people who didn't, and it
mhm.
was a miserable experience because of that. So,
Yeah.
what I did was I was like, I need a coach. And that, Jess, you and I just know each other. And
Mhm,
so I was like, okay, I'm going to hire Jess and have somebody help walk me through this whole thing. And I
mhm.
would highly recommend that you do that because I was able to enter it not from a place of holy crap, what am I going to do? But from a place
Mhm,
of, okay, I've hired someone who's going to tell me exactly what I need to do at every stage of the
mhm,
process. They're going to break it down for me because they know what they're
mhm,
doing, and I'm just going to go along for the ride. I mean, I have to do the
mhm,
work, but they
mhm.
can outline exactly what you do. And so one of the things so you and I started, I think in October, and the
I think that's
TEDx was in January. And
January.
so we spent 4 months, but I think you said normally you used about 3 months of a process.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it
we had
sort of
4.
depends. Yeah, it sort of depends. Like again, just like the application is different, every event is different. Um, but I would say on average, people have somewhere on the order of 3 to 4 months to really dial in their talk. And one of the things that's super unique, your event was a little bit different because you guys didn't have dedicated speaker coaches, but a lot of TEDx events do provide some degree of speaker coaching and support for their speakers, right? It's in everybody's best interest for people to step onto the stage fully prepared. Um, and for many of those events, those are volunteers. So if they can't find volunteers who can serve in that capacity, then speakers, kind of like in your situation, are left to figure out the path for themselves. And for some people, they wing it. And I don't mean wing it necessarily on the stage, although that does happen. Or they think,
Mhm.
okay, I know how to do it. I'm a accomplished speaker. I can do it on my own. Or they will hire someone who can help them sort of get out of their own head and get those ideas out on paper in a way that feels like that feels like you're able to say what you really want to say. And so I think first and foremost, make sure, if your event has speaker coaches, please use them by all means. That's totally what they're there for. And in fact, in many cases, they're required. And it's at no charge to you, which is awesome. Um, I've also had cases where people have been part of events where they do have speaker coaches, but for whatever reason, their assigned speaker coach or the speaker coaching process doesn't work for them and they need additional support. And I have worked with several people in that capacity. And then, of course, like you said, and in your case, just there wasn't anyone available. So, kind of look at your options and figure out, where can you take advantage of the resources that are available for you, first and foremost, that are free. And then if it's not filling the gap or if you feel like you can't kind of put the pieces together in a way that when you stand on that stage you're going to walk off and feel really proud, then that's where you get outside support. But yeah, I would say most people are able to really dial it in about 3 months time.
Which sounds like a really long time. It
It
really does.
does,
Like
but it's not.
part of me is like even saying it now, I'm like, oh, 3 months. Like,
I know
it
it's a lot.
really it really did take us that long. And I think
Mhm,
my experience, well, and you've done more of these than I have, but the people who I interviewed who have done TED Talks, so they did a lot. I interviewed a lot of people before,
mm,
I applied. And even when they had speaking coaches, a lot of times it was just somebody who was there, right? It was just somebody there at the run through, is kind of helping you
mhm.
through.
Yeah.
It wasn't doing what you did with me, which was, okay, we're going to sit down for an hour and really dissect what's your big idea? How do we frame that? How do we find research that supports that? And how does that work? And then how do we build those arcs together? And I mean, it really is like building a house, right? Where you might have an
Mhm.
idea of what you want the house to look like, but there's still like, okay, what's the foundation? And then what's the framing? And then what's the drywall? And then what's the
Mhm.
paint? And it was really like a very good step-by-step process. And I don't know if you get a free coach that does all of that. That would be amazing. But I don't know if we didn't, because we met every week for an hour for 3 months. And we used every single minute of that time. So I'd say the first month was just kind of vetting out the idea.
Yeah.
The second month was script creation and refining. And the third month was starting to memorize and fixing like, oh, wait,
Mhm.
this isn't flowing off my tongue. Like, because when you write things, it's different than when you say it. And so I
Yeah.
think a lot of that was that. And then we had Christmas. So I think that's why, like, we
Yeah. It's a
knew
little
that
bit
there was going
extra.
to be a break in there,
Yeah.
where I didn't rehearse at all over Christmas. I used all of my angst and anxiety to paint all of my rooms in my house green, which I then hated and changed them back. So that may be part of your TED process as well. Maybe that might be for another live.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I painted my room back to pink
Yes.
because it was
Yes.
hideous. Okay. But so that first month is just, vetting out the idea
Mhm.
and how do you frame it in a way that really makes sense to someone else, not just in your head. Second month was creation of the
Yeah.
script. How do we build the story? And then the third month was really refining and just
Mhm.
memorization, just over and over and
Over and
over and
over.
over
Mhm.
again. Is that
Yeah.
about average
Yeah,
for when you
it
work on this
is.
with people?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you when you submit the application, right, and you've put that big idea out there, that's I don't want to say that's your initial thinking. I mean, most of us come to these kinds of things experts in our field or, having had like this very rich lived experience around it in your case. So that's just like a little snippet, though. It's like now we have to take that little paragraph that you submitted or those 2 lines and build that into, a talk that's somewhere on the order of like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's actually really hard because for most people, because there's a level of expertise in there, and there are so many nuances to the stories that support that expertise, it's actually hard to pick and choose what is the right narrative to weave through here. And the things that you start out wanting to say, it's sometimes and more often not become things that are sort of irrelevant, like they don't matter. Or like in your case, what you started out wanting to say is not the way you actually wanted to tell the story. And so the amount of time is really meant to, I don't know if they do this on purpose, but it requires some, you know, deep thinking, and then you kind of go away and process and reflect. And then you do some stuff and you draft some more and you process and reflect. And it's like this back and forth, start, stop, start, stop kind of experience where you're really digging into the meatiness of that big idea and figuring out what is the most important thing I could say right now. And for most people, there are usually multiple how do I want to say this? Like sort of like if you think about your big idea as like a table, and there's usually multiple legs that you could stand on to bring the big idea forward. So not all of that can happen in an 18-minute or less talk. You have to pick what you're going to say and then build it out. And so a lot of that initial work is really sort of digging into what's important now and then what could be said later in a different capacity in a different forum, like it's not just about TED, right? So I think the bulk of our work is really spent in this like kind of I just like sausage making kind of phase. It doesn't feel good, it's kind of ugly, you're like, is this ever going to come together? But then eventually it does, and then you get into this phase where you're really drafting out and continue to refine and then speaking it out loud, practicing, practicing, practicing. And, um, the fact that you're having that sort of out of body experience, I think speaks to the level of work that you put into this process, because the only way that can happen is if you know your talk by heart. And I don't necessarily mean fully memorized, because like what you said on the stage varied in different places from what was on that script. And I think that's true for pretty much everyone. Like what you write down on piece of paper, what you practice over and over and over and over again is almost certainly not going to be what actually comes out on the stage. And that's because most of us are standing on that stage telling a part of our own story, which is the part that we know. And so you having that out of body experience really speaks to sort of this level of embodiment that I think happens when you go through this process. And if I could be so bold, I think, something happens from the time you start the drafting process to the delivery phase. It's like you become a changed person the more you dig into, what it is you really want to say. And there's a level of vulnerability, deep vulnerability in some cases, and especially so in yours with your talk, that comes through on the stage. And you're not the same person as the person you were when you started that process.
Yeah, I have goosebumps as you're talking about that because I think for me, it really was one of the most powerful personal development
Mhm.
exercises I've
Yeah.
ever done in my life. Even the getting sober,
Mhm.
right? It was this,
Yeah.
which is what I talked about in my TED Talk if you all haven't seen it. Um, it was this incredible it was this way of really saying, "What am I gonna stand for?" And my talk was a very personal talk, right? It wasn't, "This is the research that I've done as a doctor," right? It was "Here's my experience and what I believe." And so I use this as an opportunity to really say, what do I believe and what is my, how do I more clearly articulate what I really believe, who I really am right now? Like this is going to be the signpost in this chapter of my life on like who I am, where I'm going, what I believe. And I'm going to fully use this opportunity to do the work to uncover that and to articulate it in a very clear way. Because for me, I want to be of service to other people who've gone through something similar
Mhm.
to me. And so, how can this is my chance to do that, to do the inner
Yeah.
work and then
Yeah.
articulate it in and outside. And I took that I took that very
Mhm.
seriously. And I feel like the work that we did, it was good to have almost a project to do that for, because like you do some of that
Mhm.
inner work, but you're not really gonna like this was like
Yeah.
you're getting on the stage on January 20th and like you need to figure out what you're gonna say.
Yeah.
And so, you need to put in the reps, you need to prep for it. And so I think I got more out of that process of looking at it that way and doing that work and I wouldn't have been able to do it without
Mhm.
your guidance, being able to say like it was more therapy than I had ever done in my life in shortest period of
Yeah.
time. It was one of the most healing journeys
Mhm.
at the same time as well. And so I think you can use these things. And I think building a business can do this for you too, doing a TED
Totally.
talk, right? Writing a book, any of these things can be these kind of chrysalis kind of experiences where you
Mhm.
can use it as a like, okay, I'm in the cocoon. How do I use this as a way to have my butterfly
Mhm.
moment? And I
Mhm.
think TED for me was such an incredible experience to do that. But I think you have to have a
Totally.
guide to take you through that. I don't think I could have done it otherwise. I think it's the same with writing a book. I think it's the
Mm.
same with building your own marketing and your business, right? We were talking,
Mhm.
I talked about that earlier, a TEDx or whatever that might be. It's you have to have somebody because you
Mhm.
can't see yourself. My
That's right.
one of my other coaches says you can't see the label from inside the bottle.
Mhm.
You, you
Totally.
you need somebody who can help walk you through that.
Yeah. And I think, if people are sort of thinking about, like, this is the route that they wanna go, I would really encourage people to ask themselves, like, why this? Like, what is it about, if we're talking about TEDx, like, why is it this stage in particular? And and just a reminder that TEDx is not the only stage, right? There are other, I often say, what is the stage of your own making? Like, what is the right platform for you to show up and to share your big idea and to not be afraid of that? I'm working almost exclusively with women. And I think, we're at this very critical juncture where our voices are desperately needed. And so if you're sort of dancing around whether or not, um, whether or not your big idea is worth sharing, I just really encourage you to go deep on this because the answer is probably yes. And I can also tell you that more often than not, you think your big idea isn't that big of a deal when actually it is. And so this is to your point, it's very hard to see that on your own, right? And so just start talking to people about your idea and build from there. And um, ask yourself, you know, what is it that I really want to say? What do I really want to say? And I think when you really get honest with yourself, like each of us does have some deeper message that is worth saying and speaking into the world. And it's just a matter of, like you said, finding that courage, doing the hard work, and doing it.
Yeah, because I think, and that was beautiful. I think one of the things that I wanted to say around this idea of a big idea is this is not a sales pitch. This is not where you go and sell. This isn't a normal kind of like, hey, I'm going to speak at this group and I'm going to tell them everything that I do and how awesome I am and how they want to hire me.
Right.
The TEDx stage isn't that, and so it's more around I have something to say as an
Correct.
individual, as a person. Now, it might be based on some research that you've done or something like that. There's a lot of
Mhm,
academics who do, TEDx, but it usually always ties in with some sort of a personal story as well. So
mhm,
I think TEDx is a place where you tell those personal stories and where you get to say what you really want to say about life and who you are and our place in the universe. And that sounds very
mhm,
heady, but I really believe that that's what that place should
mhm.
be for. It's
Totally.
not a sales pitch. And
Mm-mm.
I have had people I've coached who've said, hey, I want to do a TEDx. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, I want to want to tell them more about like how awesome my products are. I'm like, that's not your,
Yeah.
we can get you at there's lots of other venues for that. This is not that
Mhm.
venue. And so that's something to consider too, is this
Totally.
isn't an application to do a sales pitch. This is much more of a personal, process. At least for me, it
Totally.
was. Again, I think there is a research type side as well. But even
Mhm.
then, it needs to be something that's very heartfelt for it to really land.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are 2 really good points. Like, if you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, I'm gonna do a TED Talk and it's gonna explode my business," I hate to break it to you, that's literally not a thing that's gonna happen. Again, that's like ultra unicorn status, and it just rarely happens that way. I mean, I think the average number of views on most TED Talks is like 500. Like 500 is nice, but it's not gonna explode your business into outer space. So to your point, the reason for doing these kinds of talks is to really think about, what is that thing that I really want to say? What is the impact I'm trying to have? And will this stage create more visibility for that idea? Like, will it invite people into the conversation so that we can potentially join forces and move the needle forward on whatever the thing might happen to be? Or, really force people to go inward and say, wow, I've never thought about that like that, or, oh wow, I think she's talking to me, right? That's the power to me of TEDx. It's literally never about how can I grow my business or how can I make more money. It just doesn't work that way. And I think the other part that I was going to mention is, well, now I've totally drawn a blank, but I think the big part is really just, oh, I know. It was around, your story amplifies the big idea. So think of it as that core big idea. And then the stories that you tell are what bring that big idea to life and make it connectable and relatable. And so to your point, there's usually this sort of personal component that comes into that process that allows us to connect with each other on a human to human level. So, if you go in with the right mindset that this is a place for me to really say the thing I want to say and invite people into that conversation
Mhm.
and to share some element of story, you're going to be in a really good place. If you're going in thinking, I want to be a viral speaker, I want to make a lot of money, pick a different platform. Pick a different platform.
Right. Even then, like, let's probably have some other work to do because I have people say that all the time. Like, all I need is I just want you to teach me how to make one viral video, and that would be then. Then I'm like, I can't like that. That's
It's
not a
not a
thing.
thing.
Like I can't teach you how to win the lotto either, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's steps and all that,
Yeah,
all that
for
stuff.
sure. For sure.
I do, though, from a practical marketing perspective, I would be remiss to say that it is a feather in your cap. I mean, it
For sure.
does, if you have all those other things and especially if you want to be a speaker, if speaking is a part of your overall strategy and part of your business is sharing your story as a way to serve others, I think that TED is a great place to do that, and that it does lend a level of credibility to
For
you as
sure.
a speaker that I think it certainly doesn't hurt. And
Right.
has my business exploded from it? No. Have I created deeper connections with people as a result? Yes. Has
Mhm.
it opened up other stages that might be bigger that I wouldn't have been on before because oh, well, if she can make it on the TED stage, she can make it here, right? Like if you can make
Totally.
it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So there is some of that as well. It doesn't mean I still have to do all the work to get the speaking engagements. I mean, they're not just, the phone isn't just ringing with speaking engagements, but it does give you a little bit of legitimacy to open
Mhm.
up maybe a bigger door that would have been harder to get into
Totally.
before. So
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it still continues to be a really important credibility marker. And to your point, it's not the only one, right? There are many other stages that do that. But I think because of the rigor of the application process, right? Just the very fact that you get selected is usually an indicator that oh this is somebody we should listen to, and then you go through the process like you said, that 3 4 month process that literally changes who you are and how you show up in the world. um, there is some credibility to that, um, and at the same time, like you said, it's not like the only thing, and it's not necessarily going to be this like thing that skyrockets you into the stratosphere. And so I just think if you can go into this process in a really grounded way with clarity in your own mind about why you're really doing this, and then be willing to do the hard work and deal with the rejections that potentially will come along the way and the ups and downs of the emotions around it and all of that, you're going to walk out onto that stage, deliver the thing and say the thing that you really want, and be able to walk off with your head held really high. And that to me is really the magic of this process, like going through and doing that level of work. Um, well, like I said, it changes you, and I think it allows you to show up more human, and that is where the connections really, really come through.
and that's where your personal brand becomes even more powerful, right? I think
Totally.
going through this process I knew I needed to speak more from the heart. I didn't know how, and I didn't know how to
Mhm,
connect my story. And going through this process, that clicked in finally for the first
mhm,
time. And that so that now, in my marketing, I've been able to be more heart centered in a
mhm.
way that I wasn't able to before because I went through the process. And I think that has then changed the way people I can market myself and I can market,
Totally.
so I think it changes the way you're able to show up in the world too. So,
Yeah,
well, thank you
totally.
so much. I said that it was going to be 20 minutes and we're at 45.
Here we are. The
We
par for
should
the
have known
course.
better between the two of us.
Yes, it's very par for the course. I'm not even surprised. I'm like, I'm going to block an hour.
Well, thank you
Oh my
so much
goodness.
for being here. I
You're
appreciate you
welcome.
so much. I appreciate all of your coaching for me during the process. And if people want to find you, how do they find you?
Yeah, I spend all my time on LinkedIn, and feel free if you are curious about how to get your big idea out of your head. That's really the heart and soul of my work. And then we figure out what is the right place for you to put that out there. So, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me at my website, jessicasato.com. Happy to just even discuss whether or not it makes sense for you, whether it's TEDx or any other platform, really getting clear on like those motivations, like we talked about, and really making sure like you you really want to go through the process and that now's the time. Right now is, it may be the answer is yes, I want to go through this process, but now is not the right time, either because, well, there's any number of reasons why that may not be. And so, if you're curious about doing the work, I'm happy to chat with you at any time.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I know. Thank you for calling us
Thank
on
you.
your vacation.
You're welcome. I know I'm in this like cabin here in the woods. So,
I love it.
um,
I'm so jealous.
all right. Well, I love you. Thank you so much.
I love you. Thanks. Thanks
Bye.
everybody for watching. Bye.
Bye.